minutes late, okay? But I am Raven Roberts, the founder of Own Your I Am. I cannot wait to start this conversation with you guys about the new mini series on Netflix called Self-Made, inspired by Madam C.J. Walker. So now I'm just waiting to add Edlin into this. Please make sure you add your questions down below. There's a question little icon. Hi, Edlin. How are you?
Hello. I'm doing well. How you doing?
I am good. Just, in the house, as we all should be.
Quarantining, that's right.
Okay, as we all should be. How are you? I know you're in Florida. How's everything down there?
Florida's not too bad. People don't quarantine as they should, to the extent that they should anyways. But otherwise, I'm okay.
Okay, yeah, I saw y'all spring breaking a few weeks ago. I was like...
Listen, it wasn't y'all, it was them kids, Them kids.
On the beach. So once again, I am Raven Roberts, the founder of Own Your I Am. This is Edlin. He is our vice chair and director of research and communications. I'm going to let you know all his credentials, all of the things why he is so qualified to have this conversation with me today. Okay.
All right. Hi, everybody. As Raven said, my name is Edlin Veras. I'm a PhD student at the University of South Florida. I study race and ethnicity kind of broadly, racialization processes more specifically. And I'm just really looking forward to getting to this conversation today. And I hope you all enjoy and can comment when possible.
Perfect. So I watched the Madam C.J. Walker miniseries when it first came out. I have been anticipating this. I have been excited about this since they dropped, even before they dropped the trailer. I think there was just images of Octavia on set, and I was just like, when is this coming out? And once I watched it, had some questions, comments, concerns, as I was watching it, I was like, this is amazing. Oh my gosh, the drama. I'm into all things drama on TV. So I was all about it until I realized this isn't all the way accurate. So I had to call up my buddy Edlin. I was like, we need to talk to the people about this. So he just finished it. You finished it this morning?
Correct. I finished this morning, last night,
yes, the days and nights are running together. He finished it, so it's fresh on our minds. I just rewatched it, so don't think that we're just like, oh, we thought about it. We watched it 2 weeks ago or a week ago. This is fresh in our minds. These are fresh, all of the things to do with the miniseries we have on the front of our heads. So I kind of wanted to get your thoughts first, Edlin, on the miniseries, as a whole, and then we'll get into the problems.
Well, I'll say, where I start? At first, I think it's great that we're seeing a lot of kind of Black shows, on Netflix. Yes. I think it's great that they're doing, we talked earlier, they did Harriet not long ago. And that has its issues as well. But I think it's great that even the names are coming out. So people are talking about, even the fact that we're having this conversation, I think is important. So yes. I'm glad that people are putting out Black historical figures in whatever way they choose to do so. Can be problematic sometimes, but kind of generally, I'm glad we're seeing a Black resurgence of shows, it seems like. So I'm happy for that. The show itself, I thought it made for okay drama. It was fine.
You definitely texted me. You were watching it. This is dramatic.
I mean, dramatic. The dramatics were all there. So in terms of the show, I thought it was okay. The dramatics was cool. But then I had to do some research, and that's the part that we're here for. So
that is the part that we're here for. So we are not going to get into all of the like details of Madam C.J. Walker's life, what wasn't in there, what was in there, what was inaccurate, and things like that. Our organization talks about colorism, so that is why we are here, because everyone noticed that, because it was pretty much straight off the bat that this had to do with a rivalry between her and Addie Monroe, light skin versus dark skin. There was a boxing match. It was dramatic. We were here for it. Okay. So that's what we really want to talk about and discuss and focus on today. Once again, when she got married, where she moved, who did what. We're not here for that. We're strictly here for the main, like, overarching storyline of the colorism. Because if you've seen the series, you know that it started from episode 1 all the way to episode 4. There was this rivalry between her and Addie Monroe, the mulatto with the long hair that was like a light brown, manageable texture. And I do want to point out the hair in the movie or the miniseries was fabulous. Okay. Like they did that. Every texture, everything was beautifully done. Okay. So we're going to give props where props is due. For me, the main thing is the way they portrayed, because Madam C.J. Walker had one big rivalry, which was Annie Malone. So we see the name similarities. Annie Malone, though, was not a mulatto woman. She was not a light-skinned woman. She was a dark-skinned woman. She actually employed Madam C.J. Walker. Madam C.J. Walker opened up her store in Denver and expand her franchise. And then from there, they had a scuffle, a disagreement. Who knows the actual like legalities of what it was. And then Madam C.J. Walker decided to, take the product, modify it, and sell it on her own. So that part is true. And Annie Malone did not follow Madam C.J. Walker all over the country trying to like come at her. She also had her own millions, so she was not just sitting in the house just like, how am I going to pay my servants? I have no one in my salon. Like, she had a thriving business. She was not caring about Madam C.J. Walker. So these were some of the bigger things that were just like, huh? What's going on here? So how did you feel about that, Edlin? Like, how they just decided, because it is inspired. It's not supposed to be exactly, but.
Right. So, and that's an important distinction. So a colleague of mine and myself talked about what it means for something to be based on versus inspired by. And I mean, clearly we saw that the people who produced and directed this took a great bit of artistic freedom in how they decided to express this story. So I will say that while it made for, interesting drama, I do think it did reinforce a lot of the team light skin, team dark skin conversations that we see today, that we have existed in history, and continue to, right? So I don't like how it was pitted so strongly against one another, right? So I think the thing that I dislike the most is the flashbacks or the cut scenes to the boxing matches, where it was literally,
we talked about that earlier.
Right, it was really literally a dark-skinned woman in gloves facing off against someone else. I thought that was a little over the top. I think not to say that these distinctions didn't exist and didn't have actual repercussions, because they absolutely do and did. But the way it was portrayed, I thought was a little sloppy, maybe, or I'm not sure.
It was very interesting because of course, this was a huge issue back when Madam C.J. Walker was developing her company. The fact that she was, this was a big thing right off of the tailcoats of like slavery. The house and field was still the mentality. You just did the article that's on the website. If you haven't checked it out, it's amazing, about the history of colorism. But we talk about the Blue Vein Society. So all of this is like the time that this is happening. So the storyline is historically like of the times. So I don't want you guys to think that we're saying that like this would have never happened. Like this is very historically accurate as far as like what could have happened during the time of, you know, the rise of Madam CJ Walker. And the boxing matches, it was very dramatic, I will say, because it was definitely reinforcing like this dark-skinned woman has to overcome this light-skinned woman to prevail in her company and like all of these things. And I was like, this is a lot, like, especially because the woman was not light skinned. I was like, this has, like, she literally did not have to do this, at least not with Annie, you know, like she may have had to do this with someone else, but like Annie was not, in our day and age, checking for her. Like she knew of her. She was like, you do you, boo, I'm gonna do me over here. Like Annie lived most of her life in St. Louis. And then she moved to Chicago. She was not following Madam. Like she was, okay, you cute, do you? I'm gonna do me over here. So it is definitely interesting how they were like over dramatized this rivalry and really made it like team light skin, team dark skin. This woman has to fight the enemy of the light skinned woman and her like beautiful tresses. One of the comments that really stuck out to me, and I want to know your like thoughts and kind of feelings of when you heard it, was when Addie Monroe was like, you Black women want to look like me even if they know they never can.
Yeah.
And I was like,
that was quite a quote. So I had a lot of thoughts on that actually. And one thing I really did like about, like you said, that there was some historical, it was historic in the context, it was historically accurate. Obviously the characters were a little different. But what I did like is this narrative of respectability that kept coming up. And we know respectability politics for Black people in the US dates back to way back when, right?
yeah.
But this idea that to be respectable, to be a quote unquote a new Negro, meant to be light, meant to have this type of hair, meant to act a certain way. So this idea that when Addie Monroe says, Addie Monroe? Yeah, Addie Monroe says that when she says, you know, I'm getting confused. When she says that they can never look like me, the sad truth is that there are benefits to that. So people are aspiring to have the longer hair, to have the more respectable look, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So I did like that. I did like that a lot. That kind of kept coming up because it showed a complexity in one, aspiring to this kind of white aesthetic, but two, also knowing that this is a tool for survival. So there's a lot of discussion about respectability politics and appearance and racial appearances and whatnot. And on the one hand, it's this kind of white supremacist ideology, but on the other hand, it's like, okay, look, we got to find a way to survive. So if my hair straight is going to get me this job, it's going to get me this interview, let me go ahead and straighten this hair, right?
Yeah.
And we see that today. So I really did like that the show did kind of carry that narrative throughout all 4 episodes.
Yeah, it definitely was a big thing. As I was watching it and just looking at all the themes of the colorism, I was like, this is so, you know, not as like overtly so, but I was like, this is still pretty prevalent today with skin bleaching and all of these things. And just knowing that, like, especially like when I think it was like when her mother told her, like, but you're a light-skinned woman in today's society, like life is so easy for you, like why are you struggling financially? And I was like,
Addie Monroe's mom?
Yeah, it was like at the last episode when you could see that she wasn't really making any money, and so she was like, her mom had called her to ask her for some money or something, and she was like, I don't have it. She's like, girl, you know you got it, you out here light-skinned with this good hair, you know you making this money. And she's just like, I'm actually not. So it just go ahead.
There was something really powerful there too, and it struck me. So that the mom, I'm not sure if it was her mom or her grandmother that she was talking to on the phone.
Yeah.
But she was dark skinned.
Mm-hmm.
And she said to her, I didn't endure rape for you to be this light-skinned woman that's not really making no money. So I thought that was really a really clever, maybe not clever, but a really important fact
Yeah.
of the time
And it was
that,
a
you know,
full circle moment.
exactly, right? So these people that are having this privileged society are also a product of this very heinous act that's been happening to Black bodies since
Yeah.
the inception of slavery in the continent. So yeah, it was quite a stark kind of eye-opening moment, I thought, to have that kind of
Yeah.
conversation between the mother and daughter.
Yeah, it was because in the first episode, and I just when you said it, I just realized it. In the first episode, um, Madam CJ Walker, Sarah, at this point, because she hasn't changed her name,
Uh-huh.
Sarah says to her, she's like, because your ancestors were raped, and she's like, how dare you use that language in my house? And so
Mm,
the fact that her mother would bring it up at the end is like,
right. No, it's powerful. It was
so
definitely powerful.
it was a powerful thing. I know you want to talk more about like Madam CJ Walker's life and how like
Hmm.
what she actually like accomplished, the things that she did that may or may not have been in the series. So yeah, I want to hear more about that too.
Yeah, so you know, growing up, you hear, you know, if you're lucky enough, you get these classes. You might have a Black professor or here and there that says something about Madam C.J. Walker, or puts you onto some, you know, some folks to read up.
Yeah.
So you know, growing up, all I heard, the very little I heard about Madam C.J. Walker was the hot comb. You just kind of, oh, inventor of the hot comb, whatever, whatever. So I was excited to watch the miniseries. I watched the miniseries, a little disappointing. So like, let me do my own research.
Yes.
And I think the biggest weakness of the miniseries was how much they undermined what Madam C.J. Walker did, right? So we're talking about someone who's born 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. No,
Yeah.
4 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. 2 years after it was ratified. And I'm thinking, okay, so this is a very dangerous time for Black people after slavery ended, um,
Mm-hmm.
moving forward. And what she was able to do and accomplish at the national and then international level, I mean, it's unbelievable. And really, her philanthropic efforts really go on most largely unseen in the miniseries. So this was
Mm-hmm.
someone who was who was setting up courses at universities. So she was a big donor to several universities in the South, some in the
Yeah.
North, and she was putting a workforce together of Black women. And in fact, her right hand man on the show, who they call Ransom, which was his real name in real life, was actually a
Mm-hmm.
lawyer, and they dubbed the
Mm-hmm.
company what they called a race company. So you see, this is a right. So it's a company for Black people by Black people to empower
Yeah.
Black women. So she was really pushing back against everything in society in a time where white men ruled. We have to remember,
Mm-hmm.
right? Madam C.J. Walker died before women were even able to vote, and here she is
Yeah.
going across the country, you know, knocking on doors and setting up shops in different places and courses in universities. So I mean, what she was able to do in a time like that, where people were being lynched daily, weekly, is unbelievable. And I think that
Yeah.
the miniseries did not pay respects to that at all.
It was interesting because once I like did more research on her and like more of the timeline, like she didn't become Madam CJ Walker clearly until she moved to Indianapolis, but she didn't
Hmm.
even meet her husband until she moved to Indianapolis. So she had already started her company with her daughter, then moved to Indianapolis, and then met her husband. Because in the miniseries, it seems as though like her husband is kind of like that wife that helps you build up everything,
Right,
and
from the
then
jump.
he's
Hmm.
like, "Oh, so you just gonna put me down to the wayside because I
Hmm.
helped you get to where you are now?" Like, and she already had, a company. And the thing that really got me, because like you said, you don't really hear, you just hear about like, oh, she was the first millionaire. She invented the hot comb. She revolutionized hair for Black women. But like, I
Hmm.
had no idea her company was thriving into the 70s. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just thinking
Right,
like,
right.
okay, like this
And
woman
then into
died.
the Caribbean and Latin America as well. I mean, yeah, she was all over. I mean, it was quite fascinated, really, with what she was able to do.
And I was just like, she died and her company was thriving
Mm-hmm.
well after her death, you know? And it was, to me, like, I wish they would have talked more about her and her business versus, like, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like the rivalry took up majority of her, like, timeline or her story in the
Mm-hmm.
miniseries instead of really what she was accomplishing. Like, they
Right.
talked about it, but it was like this was her driving force, was she had to be
Absolutely.
this light-skinned woman, so that's why she did everything that she did.
And then, so
And
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
The part that I don't like about this kind of one-on-one rivalry, light skin versus dark skin, it makes the issue an individualistic one. It makes it an issue about T all the time, and in fact, he's on the show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I also came across that in the show when she goes to the convention and goes on stage and takes the mic, that actually happened.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like, yo, Madam CJ Walker is really out here. She's like a
She
boss.
said,
She's a boss out
oh,
here. You
you're
know,
not
it's
gonna give me my
something,
time, I'm gonna take
right?
my
I'm gonna make my time, and
time.
that's commendable. I mean, beyond measure. And I'm thinking, yeah, they could have spent so much time doing other things, talking about, so for most of the schools that she was donating to, she would make up between 1 to 2% of their yearly budget. So this is someone
Mm-hmm.
that was donating significant
Yeah.
amount of money at the time to these universities. She had a course. She was really trying to institutionalize beauty culture, beauty industry rather.
Yeah.
And she had a course, the art of hair growing,
Mm-hmm.
that she was kind of putting forth and having people get trained to do this. So she was really creating a workforce of women to be able to be self-sustainable.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can't really measure how impactful that is, to Black people in general, Black women specifically. It was, yeah. Like,
She was out here, like, she had no husband. She was living next to Rockefeller. Like, she was living her best life. You know what I'm saying? Towards the end, she was like, I'm setting up a legacy. And
hmm
that was the thing that, like, really surprised me, that, because people think, a lot of people who don't know their history, they think that, like, the North and California were just like, Black people were just out here
Safe
living their
haven,
life. And, like, there
right?
was no segregation. There was no anything, clearly was the South. But the fact that she lived next to these white people, like extremely wealthy white people, first Black
hmm
person to live in this neighborhood, and she is a woman, speaks
hmm
volumes.
No,
Like,
absolutely. I mean, and this is the daughter of enslaved peoples, right? So
yes,
she's fresh. This is on the heels of emancipation. I mean, you couldn't. It's almost like you couldn't write a fiction novel like this, because it's really quite unbelievable, all the stuff that she was able to do, coming from where she came from.
yeah,
Um, so
because
it's
you have to really think about, like, the times, like, she did not have a formal education. She was, washing clothes, and that's what she knew. And she found a thing that she loved to do in hair care. And the same as Annie Malone. Annie Malone did not have a formal education. She was not out
mm,
here like, oh, I have
I
all
didn't
these
know that.
degrees, all of these things. Like, she, I think, had like a middle school education, and then she had to drop out of high school to help with family things. And she
Mm,
just really loved chemistry. So then she started developing this hair care.
right.
So these women did not have like degrees and all of these things to back, these huge companies that they had started. And so the fact that both of them were able to build these huge empires, like I said, Annie was also a multimillionaire. Okay. She was out here making the coins. Okay. So let's not get it twisted that
Right.
she was out here like, oh, I can't pay my people. She had a coin. Okay. Self-made coins, both of them. And it's just such a great legacy to be whittled down to just like this colorism issue. And colorism is a huge issue. Clearly, we got the
Absolutely.
organization to talk about it. But I think that it needs to be placed in the right situations and in the
hmm
right narratives, like to really just dumb down her whole driving force to be that when she was not fighting another life. Like her biggest rivalry at the time, which is a huge accomplishment for both of them, two dark-skinned Black women at that time,
Imagine that, right?
millions of dollars. Okay, like, to be honest, the light-skinned people was probably mad. I'm just saying, like, it probably was not the other way around. So I think that's, to me, it just did a disservice. Like I said, if you want to watch it and you just want some entertainment, do that, because when I tell you the drama, okay, not even just between her husband, I was yelling at
man, trifling, running up the hotel tab.
Trifling, Edlin, okay? When he took them boxes to that woman's house, I was like, you don't go over there. What are you doing? Okay.
I thought he was going to send somebody else. I was like, no.
I was like, no, he not. No, he not. I said, don't go to that woman's house. Don't go to that woman's house. So, telling you, the drama is there. It's the beauty of it, the costuming, the hair, everything is on point. Okay.
I mean, the hair was really like, it looked like a hair show on the show. You know what I mean? Like the different types of, the different textures and styles and varieties of people you saw. I mean, it was really, yeah.
That hair was everything. So if y'all want to see some good hair, like I was watching it, especially the second time, like Tyler needs to hire whoever did the hair for this. Okay? Like, because they killed it. The scene in Harlem, I don't really think that's what Harlem looked like back in the day, but it was gorgeous. It was, they had every type of Black person walking whatever street that was, probably 125th Street, walking up and down that block, and it was phenomenally done. Like, so it's not to say that the series is not a good series as far as production, as far as, you know, the dialogue was good. Like, I felt like it was very intelligent series in that way. It was just that this one part of the storyline, which was the full, like, from start to finish, just was not accurate, and it just was not, to me, done in the best way. And it just did her a disservice as a businesswoman. So yeah, do you guys have any questions for us, whether it's about the series, about colorism, or anything like that? Please use the question box. Let me no, cancel that. Nope, I don't see any questions yet.
While I think of some questions, something else I want to talk about. So when we think of kind of like the great, like, African American historical figures, you know, Madam C.J. Walker often gets brought up again, like in this invention realm, but not so much in this kind of like a pioneer sense.
Yes.
And if it does, it's not as widespread as it should be, right? So maybe it might be my own ignorance, or the U.S. school system that's not really putting us on game. But I was really sitting with this, and I'm doing this research. I'm thinking, you know, Bill Gates is the Madam C.J. Walker of our time. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Right, because that is the impact of what she was doing was at a level that's comparable. You know, obviously the money's different, right? But given the socio-historic context, Black woman, poor, daughter of slave peoples, you really can't. You know, you'd be ahistorical to say that she wasn't a pioneer in her own right. That deserves to be mentioned along the likes of the Du Boises, the Booker T's, and the list goes on. So, you know, I don't know if they'll do another show. You know, probably not for some years. But if they do, I hope they really speak to her impact a little bit better.
Because I would love to know and see more of that. More of, like, because at the end, they just kind of mentioned, like, oh, she gave $5,000 to the NAACP, which was, like, the biggest at the time. And it was like, okay. It was, like, kind of just these little blips. I would love to know more about, like, her legacy, especially after she died, how the company grew, how it sustained, like, because it's still a part of her. you know, her
Mm-hmm.
company, everything. And to see these women who, to me at the time, like, they were at the hotels, they were washing clothes, you know, she's paying them more than they would get there. Like, she really revolutionized women being independent
Mm-hmm.
in the day and age. Like, oh no, you can have your own coin, we're gonna get you your own bag. Oh, you want to set up a store, got you, boo. Like, she was changing the game for women, especially Black women. Like,
Absolutely.
changing the game, making sure that you're running your own business. She's giving you your own sales force. Like, one woman's like, oh, I ran the entire district. Women were not doing that, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And so I would love to see more talking about how she really like uplift these women, what that looked like, the process of that, versus just being like, okay, we didn't have a factory, now we do have a factory, and now we're in New York City. Like,
Right.